Okay, so IGCSE revision migration. So, first some definitions. Migration is basically the movement from one location to another location. Very simple. Internal migration, think inside, okay? Internal means inside. So, if a migration, so the movement from one location to another is internal, it means that it's like in the same country, okay? So, for instance, from Nice to Cannes or something. That's still in France, so it's internal. Whereas the opposite would be international migration when it's from different countries. For example, from Germany to Italy, from Israel to Ukraine or something. Okay, rural urban migration is when you go from the countryside, so from a rural area to an urban place. Okay? And this is internal migration, okay? Because it's the same country. For instance, if you go from like the farmlands, the countryside in France to suddenly go to like Cannes, then that's rural urban migration. Then there's something called temporary migration, which is when you migrate for only a limited period. For instance, it could be for a few weeks or even several years. There's also permanent migration, it's when you have the intention of staying forever in the new place that you migrate to. There's also forced migration, which is when people are forced to migrate, often because their life is in danger. For instance, of, natural disasters or something, or war. I don't know. Also, voluntary migration is when people freely choose to migrate. For instance, for better weather or better universities or anything like that. There's also economic migration, which is when you migrate for work. For instance, you want a better salary or you need to migrate for like your promotion or something. There's also seasonal migration, which is when you migrate just for a particular season. For instance, the ski season or something. There's also commuting, which is kind of like not really migration, but commuting is when you move from your home to workplace and vice versa, and it means that it's fairly far away, so it could be in different cities. Then you would be commuting. Okay. Forced migration, when people move, when they have to move because their life might be in danger. Reasons for that could be natural disasters, like I said before, for instance, a volcano, an earthquake, a flood. There could be war, so they could, fear for their lives. Political persecution, for instance, if they're like in politics or something, or even just normal people and they speak bad about the government or something. Like if there's political persecution, they would want to flee because they might get like killed or arrested. Also, religious or ethnic persecution, if there's like racism, for instance, like in Hitler's time, there was religious persecution and ethnic one too. Like he hated all blacks, Jews, anything that wasn't Aryan, basically. Also, sometimes you'll be forced to migrate if a place is being redeveloped or something. For instance, when the Three Gorges Dam was built in China, the people who had previously lived in that valley had to move. They had to resettle because something was being built where they used to live. So redevelopment or resettlement. Okay, voluntary migration, which is when people choose to move, usually for economic benefit. Some reasons for that is new job or better pay, obviously retirement, university or school. For instance, if you want to study in the States, then you go to the States for the universities, and then it's voluntary migration. Healthcare, for instance, in some places healthcare will be better or more affordable. For instance, if you have a disease or something like cancer, then you want to go to places where it's good healthcare. Also, people also voluntarily migrate for better weather. For instance, people go to Monaco because it's always sunny and warm and pretty. Blah blah. Some more words. Emigrant with an E is a person who leaves a country to migrate to another. And an immigrant is a migrant arriving in a new country with an I. Okay? Immigrant with an I, as in, and emigrant as in out. That's supposed to say out, but out. Just remember like that. A person who's leaving out. He's going out of the country. A migration balance is the difference between emigrants and immigrants. If a country has more emigrants, so people leaving, than people coming in, so immigrants, then it's experiencing a net migration loss because more people are leaving than people are coming in, so there's a net migration loss. But if a country has more immigrants, so people coming in, than emigrants, people leaving, then it's experiencing a net migration gain because net migration means like all of it in total. Okay. People normally migrate because of a combination of push and pull factors. A push factor would be something that's pushing you away from wherever you're living, and a pull factor is something that's pulling you, so attracting you to the new location. So these are some examples of push factors. If you don't have a job in wherever you are because there aren't any jobs, so you're unemployed, or if you do have one but you have a really low salary, or perhaps there's a lot of pollution and you don't want to get a disease like a respiratory illness, or there's a lot of traffic and it's annoying. Maybe wherever you are there's bad weather, for instance, if you're like in some shithole in England, you want to leave. There's maybe high crime rates, always pickpocketing, burglaring, I don't know, burglars. There would be burglars and maybe people are mugging you in the street or whatever. Those are all push factors. Also, poor education and healthcare and poor housing. These are all things that will push you away from where you're living. Some pull factors, so some things you'll see in the place where you want to go to that will make you want to go there. Well, a better job, obviously, a better salary, which goes hand in hand. Better schools and hospitals, and if it's just peaceful and safe, so not a lot of crime, and perhaps you have friends and family already living there, so those are pull factors. Okay, but when you migrate into a new country, there are some problems that you may face. Firstly, cost of housing. For, I mean, for us, it's not really a big deal now, coming to think of it, but mostly think, for instance, if you go from Mexico to the States. Okay, that's a good example to use. Those kind of migrants. Firstly, they might have trouble with the cost of housing because obviously in the States, houses are more expensive than in Mexico. And, they don't have a job yet, so yeah. Also, racial tension. Since they're like migrants and they're not coming from that country, many people might be racist or discriminate against them. Also, there are language barriers, which is when there's a barrier between the languages in the sense that they don't speak the language of the country that they're going to. For instance, Mexicans going to USA often speak Spanish and don't speak English, and if they do, it's a very broken English, so they can't properly communicate. So there is a language barrier, so that's a problem. Also, they may have different cultures, so that can also be a problem because, the things that they'll find in Mexico won't be found in these states. Also, they may not have friends nor family in the States, so that's kind of a problem. Also, they might not have enough money, and they also can have passport or visa issues, which is always a bummer. Okay. So, impacts of migration. The process of migration can have a positive and negative impact on both the source country and the receiving country. Here is a summary of some of those impacts. So for the source country, so the one that has the people in the beginning where they're leaving from, well, some advantages for them would be, for instance, the unemployment rate would be reduced because more people are leaving to find jobs elsewhere. So in total, there are less people who are unemployed in the country because all the unemployed ones are leaving. Also, there's reduced pressure on schools and hospitals, which is always a good thing. Also, the friends just the people who migrate away, who emigrate, and the unemployed ones, and then they get jobs, well, they can send some money back to their family, right? Or friends. And this is good for the people. Because then, even if they're unemployed, they get money from, like, the working friends who migrated. We call it remittances, but you can just say money, because it's the same thing. Remittances just means money that is sent home to friends and family by migrants living in a different location, often overseas. But you can just say money that they send. It's easy. Okay, also, another advantage for source countries is that they will have improved relations with foreign countries because more of their people are working for them and stuff. So improved foreign relations. Also, migrants may eventually return home with new skills and knowledge of new technology, and that can result in, just industrial improvement and stuff, because people are smarter and more educated. Also, there will be a reduced birth and fertility rate, and people in reproductive age range leave. Because, that's generally the age that people will emigrate. For instance, if you're 90 years old, you're not going to leave your country no matter what. But if you're like in your 20s, you're like still pretty young, you still want to make a lot of money, so you might leave. Yeah. But there are some problems for the country that has all the people leaving. So the source country, which is a country where the people leave from, where they emigrate from, well, some problems would be that often the skilled and educated migrants will leave, which we call a brain drain, such as the Berlin Wall, in history, when the people were leaving from the Soviet Germany to the Western Germany, and they called it a brain drain because all the smart people would leave. So, yeah. Also, the dependency ratio increases as the economically active leave. Okay? So, we said that economically active are the people between the ages of 16 and 65, so the working people. So, they're leaving, so obviously the dependency ratio increases because the economically inactive people, so the dependent youth and the dependent elderly, well, they still depend on the economically active and there are less there, so, Also, another disadvantage is that there a dependency on remittances, so money that is sent home from friends and family in other countries, develops. And this can be a problem because people are really dependent on it and just kind of, without it, they wouldn't know how to get along, and that's never good because you should always be independent financially. Also, there may, sorry, there may be a shortage of workers, especially during harvests. Because if people are always leaving the country, emigrating, then there aren't enough people to work in the original country. Yeah, also family separation. Sometimes the son or the dad or something will separate, and that's never a nice thing because then you can't be together. Also, gangs that are formed in the new country, for instance, like the Crips or whatever in the States, the people in that gang, they were first they were migrants, but they can go back to their home country and bring back the gang that they formed in the new country, and that's never a good thing because gangs are bad. Okay, so let's see the other way. So the country that is getting the immigrants, so it's the country where the people are immigrating to. Okay, immigrants. So say now we're saying the USA in the Mexico USA example. So the USA is receiving people, so they're the destination country. Some advantages would be, firstly, they're getting many workers who are manual workers who are prepared to work dirty, low-paid jobs, for instance, in farming, construction, and cleaning, just manual work. Also, they get many skilled workers who are added to the skilled workforce, which we call the brain gain. For instance, teachers, nurses, and lawyers, and even baseball players. Also, another advantage would be new cultures. Sometimes they expand their cultures. For instance, food and dance, like, I don't know, tango and tacos can, like, restaurants can open and stuff. That's always good. Or dance halls or some shit. Also, they would also have improved. I'm sorry. They would also have improved links with source countries and possibly new markets because they have better foreign relations, so they can have improved links. But there are also some disadvantages for the country. Firstly, racial tension. Because in places like the US, there's already a high unemployment rate for actual US citizens. So they will often blame Central Americans for migrating into the States and taking their jobs. That's their viewpoint of it. They feel like it's their fault that they're unemployed. Also, there were maybe inflation caused by the increase in demand, because inflation happens when like so many people want a product but there's not enough of that product, so they need to make it more expensive. So yeah, that's never a good thing. Inflation. Think the Great Depression in Nazi Germany. Well, no, it wasn't Nazi Germany back then, but Weimar Germany, whatever. This isn't history. Okay, also another disadvantage for the destination country would be that there would be pressure on schools and hospitals. For instance, in parts of California, over half of people speak Spanish, and this can cause problems for schools and hospitals because you can't really communicate. Also, possible unemployment, which, for instance, the migrants can potentially be unemployed because they can't really talk the language, for the most part. Also, there may be pressure on housing, electricity, and water since there are more people that need it. Lastly, there'd also be more congestion and pollution. Okay? So more traffic and more pollution because there are just more people. So obviously. And lastly, gangs were created by, like, gangs can be created in the destination country. E.g., gangs were created by Salvadorian migrants, e.g. the MS and the M18, which are just street gangs and drug trafficking and shit. Okay, now we have a case study of an international migration. We'll do it from Turkey to Germany. So, and always remember, every time that it's a place-specific reference, like a country name or a city, then you need to remember it because it will give you an extra point. Okay, what are some push factors? Why would you leave Turkey? Well, there are not many manufacturing jobs because the country is largely dependent on agriculture. So it's very manual. There are not many manufacturing jobs. Also, the farmland that they have is not very productive. It's unproductive actually because they use poor agricultural techniques because they haven't really mechanized. They're not using really good techniques. They're just using old, outdated ones, so they are not getting a lot of yield. They're not having a high yield from their crops. Also, there may be drought in places like Central Anatolia. Okay, Anatolia is a place in Turkey, and you need to remember it. So there may be drought in places like Central Anatolia. Anatolia sounds kind of like Antonia. Anatolia. So yeah. Because there is a lot of drought, it's hard to farm and shit. So that's the reason why they wouldn't want to stay there. They're being pushed away. Also, refugees can fear for their lives if they live close to the Iraqi borders because of the war and stuff, and civil wars and shit. Just danger for their lives. So they may be scared that they might be killed as a war casualty because they live near Iraqi borders. Remember, Iraqi borders. So those are push factors. And some pull factors, so why would they want to go to Germany? Well, many jobs are available in Germany. For instance, rebuilding cities after World War II. Cities like Dresden. Dresden in German, but Dresden. Just think of it like that. Think of it like a dress and then the beginning of Dennis. Dresden. Okay, so obviously now the cities have been rebuilt, but this is on the mark sheet, so you can use this. Many jobs like rebuilding cities post-World War II like Dresden. And also greater access to schools and hospitals in cities like Frankfurt or Berlin rather than in rural Turkey. You don't need to say Frankfurt or Berlin, you can just say any German city, just the main one. So, because obviously the schools and hospitals there will be better than in rural Turkey. Obviosamente. Also, in Germany, the people can buy food from shops, which is more reliable than growing it yourself in case that you don't make enough or if the crop is infected or something. Okay, there are different types of migrants. I kind of touched on this slightly before, but let's go more in detail. So a refugee is a person who has been forced to leave. Shit. Hold on a second. Okay, a refugee is a person who has been forced to leave their house and their country. This might be because of a natural disaster, war, religious, or political persecution. And persecution is when someone is attacked for what they believe in, for instance, their religion or political belief. An IDP, which is an internally displaced person, is when someone has been forced to leave their home, so it's internal, but not their country. Okay, they were displaced from their house, but they're still internally in their country. Okay? An asylum seeker is someone who's trying to get refuge, so a residency, in a foreign country because their life is in danger in their home country. This is usually because of their political or religious beliefs. For instance, during the Holocaust times, people like Jews moving to different countries would have been asylum seekers. They're seeking for an asylum, which means just like a safe place. Okay. So, what are some reasons for being a refugee? We kind of already went over this with forced migration, but whatever. War, for instance, in Iraq, natural disasters like the Indian Ocean tsunami, famine and or drought, political persecution, for instance, in Syria, and religious or ethnic persecution. What are some problems faced by refugees? So, people that are forced to leave and they suddenly just need to go somewhere else. What are their problems? Firstly, they may not have houses. Secondly, there will be a shortage of food and water because they're just randomly there. They're trying to find a place to stay, but they don't have food or water, or if they do, not enough. They may not have jobs or money. They may not even have clothes, and if they do, they will not have a lot. They'll also have poor medical care, so there'll be a lot of diseases and that can't be treated. So yeah, that's another problem, disease. And partly the reason that they get disease is because of poor sanitation. Often refugees live in refugee camps. So it's very dirty. There are not really proper toilets and stuff, so disease spreads quickly. Also, there are always safety concerns. War, robbery, rape, for instance, if you're a refugee, because you're not in a safe place. Also, language barriers. You may not speak the language of the place that you seek asylum in. Lastly, there may not be education for their children for the children of the refugees, which, just is not good. Okay, what's the problem of we did go over this, but I'm just going to repeat it again. What are some problems faced by receiving countries of refugees? 1. The cost of providing food and water, the cost of providing education for children and medical care for everyone, the possible spread of disease to native population, increased pollution and congestion, possible racial tension, language problems of dealing with refugees, increased unemployment, possible inflation because of rising demand, food shortages of water, electricity, etc. So, what are some solutions to the refugee problems? Firstly, you can try to end the problem in the source country. So, for instance, in Iraq, people may be emigrating, so leaving because there's a war. A way to stop this is to solve the actual war so people won't have to leave. So there are organizations like the United Nations who will do this. Okay. Then there's also the return of migrants to their home, which is kind of what would happen if there was an end of problem in the source country. Then there's also the return of migrants to areas or countries near their home. And also migrants settled in a foreign country a long way from their home, which they can all do that.